one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, what made you want to participate in the challenge? Obviously, you have a ton of experience, 15 plus years, I believe. So what made you want to participate in the challenge in the first place?
Yeah, I had seen the challenge post on LinkedIn. It looked like a fun little exercise. And I liked the fact that you were only looking for 2 to 4 hours of effort, that this wasn't something that was super in depth. It was a very well described brief. The challenge was easy to wrap your head around. And as soon as I had read the brief, I had a quick idea. I'm like, oh, I think I might be able to make something of this. And, jumped into SolidWorks, put something together in an hour, and then put together the corresponding documentation to help explain some of the thinking, because we knew that it's all about communication. That if you can communicate your idea to the judges, then your idea can potentially stand on its own, right? Rather than you needing to explain the idea.
Exactly. Now walk me through that process, because obviously a lot of the participants are young and up and coming engineers. So walk me through that process of what you decided and how upcoming participants should think about how to articulate and present their ideas, because I think that communication is a very important piece.
Yeah, and with a brief such as this, where we had two components that needed to rotate relative to each other, they needed to lock into position at 90-degree increments. When a brief is very open-ended like that, my design process does always come up with a solution that has some flexibility into it, right? If you could have, gone into the MasterCard catalog, grabbed some ball detents, but now you'd be stuck with that particular ball detent and the spring force that was corresponding with that feature. Whereas something that you're relying on the geometry to provide that spring force, I could thicken up that beam, I could throw another iteration on the 3D printer. And that's just my general approach to product development, is if I know that the problem is kind of open-ended and the constraints aren't particularly well defined, then come up with a solution that you can dial in to be able to address different needs, rather than lock into a singular solution that might be a little bit more difficult to iterate on or pivot out of.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, which gets into the next problem, which you answered somewhat, but what was the approach you took to solving this problem? And I think you answered most of that, but what other, I guess, insight could you give for some of the up and coming engineers? Because we're actually going to rerun this challenge. So I don't want to give away the answers, but how should people be thinking about approaching a problem like this?
Definitely. So without giving away a solution, this was the kind of key to the part. I'm not going to hold it up too closely, but ultimately these little arms, have some flexure to them, and they're adjustable, right? That this was something that was relatively easy to put together on the 3D print. This is a kind of challenge that's actually difficult to simulate, in that you're relying on real world components to move, to actuate, to do something. And my approach is, fail fast. So come up with an idea, experiment with the idea, get it on the 3D printer, play around with it, see how it functions. And if need be, put another part on overnight and learn your lessons, and ultimately break the problem down into its core components. On this particular challenge, we needed some kind of spring force to engage to support the detents of it clicking out of the different positions. But also we had to think about the different ways that the parts could go together. In this case, I had already decided plastic was the way to go. So if you're leveraging plastic and plastic production methods, you can do things like these little integrated snap fits. I think one of the comments from the judges actually was that these snap fits do pose a molding problem, and they're right. There would need to be more complicated tooling for how they're envisioned here. You'd need a little lifter or slide to pop that snap out of the mold. But maybe you could do a little opening here to have some steel pass through in a shutoff scenario. There's ways of working through that, but ultimately you do get this of considering how these parts potentially go together. And so leveraging the material, leveraging the production method to not just have the plastic springs work, but also how the two parts clip together and how the rotation between the components was supported.
All right, and that kind of leads me to one of the next points, because you brought up the mentors, judges. What did you think about the overall experience? Because that's a critical component for us. Obviously, yourself, senior engineer with a lot of experience, but the mentors, the judges, the feedback that you were able to get, how much value did you derive from that part of the process?
So I think the communication throughout the process was great. it was interesting being able to see some of the previous answers. And that was another thing that actually drew me to the challenge, was that I knew that the idea that I had in my head hadn't been illustrated yet. And so even if my answer hadn't have been selected, I felt that it just at least accelerated the conversation and maybe gave some different viewpoints to a younger engineer or designer who saw that and like, oh, I hadn't considered doing it that way. And maybe that idea gets explored further in the next product that they are asked to design or have a chance of working on. I think the communication throughout the process was great. I got a notification when judging would commence. I got a notification that there was some feedback from the judges, and there were 3 different viewpoints, I think, which is great. Being able to see 3 different experts in industry, being able to judge the different ideas. And to me, it looked like in reading some of the feedback of other answers that the judges gave equal time to all of the participants. It wasn't that they favored one answer or other, that there was very detailed feedback and very valuable feedback to all of the participants in the challenge.
Yeah, that was kind of the goal for us and what we wanted to be able to accomplish. So with that, and the amount of feedback that you were able to get and some of the other participants, what would you say to future participants who want to join and basically compete in challenges like this? What is the intrinsic value for them, even for someone like yourself who has that experience? Is it a matter of like sharpening your skills and it's just a matter of you enjoy competition? What were some of the primary factors that drove you to do it, and why should others participate in these types of challenges?
Throughout my career, I've always tried to give back in giving sessions at SolidWorks World, the 3D Experience World, putting recordings of those sessions up on YouTube. That in design engineering, industrial design, mechanical engineering, some of those lessons are only gained through experience and actually working through problems in the first place. And I just like the opportunity to be able to showcase my idea and hopefully someone was able to learn from it. The fact that there was a cash prize is always a nice incentive to want to commit some time. But even the 2-hour commitment, I wouldn't have minded if it was just an entirely challenge that didn't have that. There was no incentive to be able to put together an answer for that challenge. For a younger designer or an engineer, I would challenge them to be able to learn from other participants' entries and just see how other people are solving problems. And is there something that, oh, I hadn't considered that and I might want to do that in the future? And why would others want to compete in competition? I don't think it's competition. It's more about being able to get exposure. I think it's for a younger designer, it's great to be able to say, yeah, I submitted an entry. I was the runner-up in the competition. I can't wait to the next one. I really want to be the champion the next time, and be able to promote themselves and show that, hey, I actually know how to solve a problem. That ultimately, that's as in a hiring manager role, it's one of the things that I look for the most is, can I solve a problem? And entering a challenge like this is a great way of showcasing your problem solving ability and your communication ability, which I think is also a key aspect here. Is it's a free avenue or free venue to be able to practice and get that valuable feedback from the judges. And one thing to consider is, even though you have a very clear image in your head of what your contest entry might be or what your design is and how it operates, that image in your head is a little bit more challenging to convey to someone else. And so that strong communication, to very able to clearly articulate your thinking and how your concept or how your design solves a design brief, it's a great way to practice those skills, because they're a key skill set in your tool as you advance your career as a designer, as an engineer.
Yeah, and I think something you said earlier really kind of resonates with us, which is if you're a hiring manager, what are you looking for? Because there's 2 ends of the spectrum here. There's the up and coming engineers that every entry level job they're applying for says it needs X amount of years experience. And they're all like, where the hell am I supposed to get that from? I just graduated school. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's hiring managers, to the point you brought up. How can you see what this person's problem solving capabilities are and how they communicate those designs and you communicate their whole process and their design process? And I think that was another critical component that, reason why we wanted to create this with Assist to Develop, to be able to help both ends of that spectrum find that middle ground. Tell us a little bit about the session that you're running at SolidWorks World next week. or 3D
So
Experience World, excuse me.
3D Experience World at 10:45 Wednesday morning. Couldn't tell you the room at this point. It's called Will It Blend 2023. It's all about filleting, using the filleting tool in SolidWorks and how you can work through challenges. Getting fillets on your models. Everyone's running a situation where, oh, 5 millimeters didn't work. I'm just going to put 4.8 on the model and just get that feature in there. But ways to work through that and ways of blending dissimilar geometry together. And it'll be something for industrial designers, it'll be something for design engineers, and something for SolidWorks users in general. Hope if you do have the opportunity to check it out in person, and if not, looking for it some snippets on LinkedIn and YouTube in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Appreciate your time and explaining some of the benefits of what you got from running and participating in this challenge. And we hope to have your support here in the future.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure being able to compete, and all the best for future competitions.